Hi, it's Jamie from Evolution 5. Today I've got a very special guest. It's Will Barrett from Francis Construction. We're going to talk about what it's like to run a contracting firm in the construction industry, and we're also going to talk about what the future of the construction industry might look like, and get the perspectives from Will. Will, welcome. I think I mentioned just a minute ago, I didn't actually realise that Francis has quite a history and been going since 1889, which is fantastic. Tell us a little bit about Francis, about that history.
Well, we think it's that far away. We've actually got an invoice from something like 1914 from one of our stonemasons that we still work with, and they're a family-owned business as well. So yeah, it's quite an extraordinary history, but and one we're very proud of as well. But with a long history, there are some cons that come with that history as well. But we're very proud of our history, and it's continued to develop. You know, you've got to look forwards, you've got to move forwards, and excited about the future.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that. And as I said, I think that's a tremendous to have that type of history, and you know, especially in a very challenging industry. So, talking about a challenging industry, what makes Francis stand out from its competitors? What makes you a different construction firm?
I think we made a bit of a move to make sure we didn't get too big. Mm-hmm. I think back in 2015, I set a bit of a business plan up and said, what do we need to be really professional and friendly? And so we engineered the business to be that size, rather than saying, what numbers do we need to hit to be successful? We looked back and said, who are the people we need in the business in certain positions to provide a really good value service that's really professional, but is friendly and personable still. And that is why we've got to the size we are today. And we're not on a massive growth path at the moment. We just want to be really good at what we do. We've got enough people to be good at what we do, and recruit some really good talent, but we are not too big that everyone is just a number. And also that means we can have personal relationships with our clients and our supply chain as well, which means, you know, when you're working with people you like to work with, life is easier, isn't it, generally?
Yeah, I really like that, Will, and I think that's a really sort of good way of approaching business. I think it's really great. I think it works both ways for customers, feeling valued, they're getting a good service, they're getting a valuable service, but it's personable and flexible. I think that's ultimately a big thing in construction. But also with that, you know, you set out these plans, but not everything goes to plan, and we do face challenges. So what are the sort of challenges Francis Construction face in running a business in the industry?
I think one of the most current challenges, we've been through some quite big challenges recently, and I'll come on to what my current challenges are. But if you look back, you know, we've had COVID, which was pretty unusual and unprecedented. If you look, we had 10 years before COVID of really quite stable trading. Mm-hmm. You know, from 2008, actually, the economy was fairly stable and had slow growth, but very consistent growth. We didn't have a huge amount of regulatory change. You know, we've just come into this year. We've got just coming out of COVID and Ukraine and all the issues we've had. We've got a huge amount of regulatory change at the moment in terms of building control, fire regulations, etc., etc. That is really interesting. We've been through quite a cycle of different economies, scale. You know, construction costs have shot up in, you know, post-COVID, and now they're stabilising. So we've had a lot of change, which has been really interesting, potentially quite difficult, and we've seen a lot of companies, unfortunately, become insolvent and stop trading in that period, which has been really interesting. But what do we find? What am I finding difficult at the moment? I think predictability of workload at the moment. I think what we're starting to see is more governance coming into our clients, and particularly with the high interest rates and high inflation we've seen over the last couple of years. The normal procedure of tendering a project, being awarded the project, and then starting on site and getting going has been extended significantly. And that's generally around affordability. And some of that is around increased prices that have meant that projects are outside scope or outside budget. So value engineering then has to occur to then bring the project back into viable status. But actually, there's just more governance, more legals to go through. I think what we've seen actually, and one of the things for driver this is a lot of the old heads of the industry who traditionally would have pushed things through knowing that it's been okay because of their experience and their relationships potentially with their funders or their senior teams. Quite often they might have retired now or moved on or be in a consultancy and not in the business. And we've got the next generation of construction leaders and businessmen and women coming through. And I think they are more hesitant about driving things forward and making sure that the correct sign-offs, and I think there's more sign-offs in place as well that are required now, extra governance. And I think that is slowing that whole process down a little bit, which is all for good reason. But it is definitely creating a bit of a drag on the industry, and that will drag the economy as well. And when I speak to other contractors and other clients, I think they're very aware that that is happening, and that's probably our biggest challenge at the moment, to make sure when we focus on securing a tender, we have the right team available for when that project comes to site. We have the right resource available to tender it, because the tender dates are moving quite a lot. And then, everything is geared up from then. The right design management in that period between securing the tender and going to site. So, it's a bit of a juggling act sometimes, knowing when you see a tender, when it comes in through the door, or the conversation you have before it's coming in, and then when it actually goes to site, knowing that period and knowing when it's going to start generating revenue, when your teams are available. That is the trickiest bit for me at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, you've provided a really good response there for anyone sort of watching. You've sort of articulated a lot of challenges we face, and I'm glad you picked up COVID as well in that answer, because although I'm asking you the challenges today, that was obviously a big challenge we faced sort of a couple of years, and companies are still obviously facing challenges of the aftermath of obviously COVID and getting back to work. And I think what's sort of really important, it's one thing we talk about surviving COVID, but it's how have our business developed and evolved to sort of now operate in what's a new landscape. So I think you provided a great answer there. I want to sort of move on to you personally. So you become the managing director of Francis in 2015, which is not far off 10 years now. So that would have made you quite a young director. So for anyone watching this video, inspiring to be a manager and potentially a young director in the future. So what challenges does a young director face running a contracting firm?
It's a really good question, Jamie. I can remember so many things. I think that's particularly mixed with the fact that we're in old business. We had some of our team had worked for us for nearly 40 years, and then I come in to the business and got all these ideas, and it's about bonding people together. So whilst we had quite a good culture before, I think everyone had their own reasons. So a lot of my job was bonding people together, and it took me a bit of time to realise that, and then defining what it was to work for a team. But so that was one of the internal challenges, really. Everyone was best intended, but everyone had their own reasons for doing something, and it's getting back and pulling a team together, aligning people. I remember, and I think one of the first times we met, we were at a CIB event, and we sort of looked across and saw each other's name badges and realised we had a similar name, and we might be related. And at that time, I think we were pretty much half the age of a lot of people in the room. Yeah. And I remember used to ensure I was dressed very smartly all the time, and I had always had a shirt and tie on and a jacket, and a suit usually, actually, not just a jacket, to make sure that I was presenting correctly when I was in rooms of people that I could be maybe just more than, but sometimes half the age of. But so there was some funny challenges, really. But at the same token, it gave me a difference. It gave us a difference, as I'm sure it has your business, where you can go in, you've got lots of energy. Sometimes, one of the things I loved about Constructing Excellence, it was about breaking the mold, really, challenging the norms. And being a young managing director, it does give you the ability to think about things differently, and it's getting that balance right, because you can be a bit of a disruptor, but at the same token, we are quite an established industry, and if you disrupt too much in the wrong way without some good background, some good knowledge and some good evidence to make the decisions you're making, you can lose clients and you can lose respect in the industry. So it's a really fine balance about driving it and driving change, which I think is really important, because it's easy for me to say, because, and probably for you as well, Jamie, because we've seen an industry, we were in that growth phase of the industry and it felt stagnant for quite a long time. And then we've had, the last 10 years have been crazy with technological advances and what we're building, and also carbon availability, you know, how much how important sustainability and carbon reduction is. That's a big challenge for us. I'm sure we'll talk about it in a bit, but you know, it kind of feels like there was a period where we were kind of just as an industry, we would just turn up and build things and move on. There's a very different value proposition now. I also think there's some challenges around finance. You know, it feels like everything is squeezed a little bit more now.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel there's as much liquidity around as there was 15, 20, 30 years ago, where people had more cash to spend. Even if they didn't, there's so much more focus on every extra bit of cash now and what people want for that return. Yeah, I feel like the industry's a slightly different place now. Probably better for it and a bit more, you know, but different nonetheless.
I mean, I take my hat off to anyone running a business and being ultimately responsible for the success of that business, or obviously accountable for the failure of that business. But to do it at such a young age is incredible. So well done you. But just moving on. So if you 10 years on, lots of challenges. You've obviously done very well. France is doing very well. So what advice could you give to somebody who's starting out their career and they have aspirations to be a manager or have their own business in the future? What advice could you give them?
I think the first thing is don't rush it. I think I was over ambitious, and I think anyone who's ambitious has that same rush. It's always wanting to get on. What's the next thing? Okay. And sometimes I look back and think I probably rushed that a bit too much, or I wish, you know, that particularly the time at university, you have time to really understand things and look into things and read about things. And I wish I don't think I had any more time to do anything. I used my time quite effectively, I think, really. But I wish I'd had more time to really read about things and get a better understanding, because time only speeds up. So that would be my first point of advice: is don't rush, use that time effectively, become as rounded as possible. I think my second piece of advice would be around people. People are so important in the industry, and when we talk about success of a business isn't just me. It is the people that I have in the business and the clients we work with in our supply chain. So people become good at talking to people, understanding what people want, and how you can help them with that, and support them up and down the chain. Yeah. And I think the third piece of advice is take a long-term approach. You know, we're very, very quick to want quick things. The environment we live in now is very immediate. You know, you can pick up your phone and buy something now, which is very convenient, but actually there's a value with things taking a bit of time and not wanting to rush things and building things properly and slowly, and actually knowing what that end picture is going to look like, that legacy. And we're becoming more and more immediate, and that worries me a little bit. People want things now. And I think there's a real value in taking a step back, taking a breath, and taking a bit of a longer term approach.
Yeah, that's some really good advice there. There's really good nuggets. I'm really pleased to hear you've, one of your pieces of advice was around people, because, we won't achieve anything without good people, effective communication. There's a lot of focus on the sort of technical skills and technical problem solving, but ultimately it comes down to our ability to work and build relationship and trust and collaborate with people and develop people. So yeah, I really that resonates with me a lot. So on a similar theme, but sort of slightly changing the subject. contribution. So one of the things that's really important to me is the contribution we make to the industry that we work in, but also obviously in the communities of which we deliver some of these projects. So, you know, I know you've been involved with Construction Excellence, the CIOB, and also governor of a sort of primary school. What made you do these things, Will? And, you know, what's your sort of perspective and view on making a contribution beyond just delivering the work that you're employed to do?
I think if you look back at and talk about things we were talking about earlier, when I was first into my role as contracts manager at Francis, and even before actually. So when I was at Wilmot Dixon, I spent a lot of time with G4C, which is Generation for Change, which is the sort of young division of Constructing Excellence, and sat on the national board for that. Then I joined Francis and was still going up to London involved with that. But there was, as a regional South business, there was very little cross-pollination with some of the national programmes we were working in. So I moved back and was asked to set up Constructing Excellence Berkshire and G4C and Construction Excellence Berkshire, and then very quickly took on Constructing Excellence Berkshire. And one of the reasons I did that was to create a bit more traction. You know, I was young to do what I was doing, and it gave me some experience. It gave me a network. It gave me a bit of kudos and a really good platform to get out there and get known and learn from some really good people who are like-minded. Those groups are people who want to change the industry, and for the better, just slowly, and that gave me a really good platform with them. So that was one of the main reasons for doing it. And I think that instilled, even before, I think, you know, Wilmot Dixon were really good about adding value when I was working with them, so it kind of ingrained from me. And when I set the business plan up in 2015, I started really thinking about what we want to be as a construction business. And there's too many, at the time I was seeing too many business go in there, cause quite a lot of disruption and leave a product, whether that product was substandard or standard, whatever, it didn't matter. But they weren't really adding value. They were just going and do the project. And we have a huge impact, I think, and we don't realise the impact we have as a construction industry. We have a huge legacy, which is lovely. Yeah. A lot of the industries that we work with, and you know, look at the finance sector, arguably we have some of the biggest legacies when we build buildings that are going to be there 60 to 100 years, and the influence that has. And we don't see that. And I really started to think about that. But also, when we're there, we can be quite disruptive and quite noisy, and also we're there to create a change. So let's help be part of that change. So why can't we get involved with the local community? Why can't we inspire people to get into construction? Why can't we help people look up? So when I'm up in London, I always try and tell myself to look up, because everyone walks around with their heads down, and you know, I want to look up and look at and see all those big stones and bricks and buildings that have been built, and you know, those could have all been built off timber scaffolds hundreds of years ago with people carrying those materials around, which is very different to how we do things today. And appreciate what construction gives us. It houses us, it enables us to work, it enables us to get to work, it enables us to have all our leisure facilities. You know, it is an enabler. And so, yeah, all those things have brought me to the mindset that we need to feed back into the community, inspire people we work with, inspire the communities we work with. And we have a couple of different ways to do that. We encourage our staff to take time out, the team to take time out, and whether they're, you know, it's doing some education, just creating more opportunities for people to understand about construction, or just helping locally in the community, shouting about what a great industry construction is in many ways. Yeah, we can't be successful, and my opinion about the environment and charity as well, we can't be successful if we're too insular. We need to, you know, if we're a successful business but we're detrimental to the environment, we're not a successful business. And that's been our policy since 2015. And the same with training. You know, we've taken a big stance when a lot of people are losing their direct trades. We've purposely kept a proportion of direct trades on, and that allows us to train apprentices and then take people up through the business, and hopefully they're going to be our tradesmen and experts of the future, allowing us to deliver the expert buildings. So hopefully that's answered some of your questions.
Yeah, Will, I really like your thinking. You've articulated it really well, and you've mentioned some really great things there. And you sort of posed a sort of rhetorical question: why can't we? Why can't we? And the fact is, we can. And this moves us on quite nicely into, what can we do, and what does the future of construction look like? So I just want to gain some really sort of your thoughts and perspectives and ideas on some of the things that will, help us progress, but also things that will be what the future of the construction looks like. So I've got 5 things. I've just got them here, if you don't mind. I just want to sort of get your thoughts on them. So, one of the big things we talk about a lot is technological advancement. So from your perspective, what do you think that looks like in 20 years' time? How does that evolve?
Well, I was speaking at a conference about this recently. So wind back and think about where we're thinking, because this conference was about Elon Musk. Just after Elon Musk made that statement about, robots are going to be taking over our jobs very soon. So leisure is going to be the thinking was leisure is going to be a massive, much bigger sector, because with any of that we'll have more leisure time. Arguably we do now, we did 50 years ago. Interesting concept. So where are we going to be? How are we going to be living? It's a really interesting concept. Are we going to be living where we're working? Are we going to be working from home more? Or are we going to go back in a cycle where actually we're going to be working in the office more? It's really interesting, and that drives the sort of technology as well, because what's the next step with mobile phones? Are we going to be having holograms soon? I don't know. I can tell you a bit about how construction is how I see construction, but construction is driven so much by now how we're living and working and the technology of day-to-day stuff. Are we going to have little chips in our brains with a little camera in them? I don't know. But what I can tell you, it's a really exciting time in construction. Some of the things that are struggling, BIM came in 15 years ago now. Building information modelling came in, where we're building in 3D models, and everyone inputted the same information into the same model, for those of you who are not familiar with BIM. And that was really interesting, and we tried to do it, and it was very expensive, and people said, well, we can't have it on a laptop, we needed a desktop because the computers weren't powerful enough. And then you needed to send people on a 2-week training course. Now the laptop comes out, everyone can do it on the move, and it is even I can use it, so it's not that difficult. I wouldn't say I'm a trained dog, but I can use it and play with it and do things with it, and without a 2-week training course. So that exponential curve, as it was, about improvement is really exciting. And I have to keep pinching myself and telling me that, because I listen to the news most days and I think, oh God, what's happening in the world? But we are on a really exciting, if you think, and I tell myself, you think where we came from 100 years ago, we just invented the car, essentially. And aeroplanes was just starting to be invented, and look at where we are now. We've had a massive evolution in 100 years, and we keep digging ourselves a hole with technology. And I hope that continues, and we come out of this difficult time, and we're saved by our own sort of genius, as it were, not mine, the human races. We solve our problems. So I'm really, really inspired by that. And we've got so many things, the digital twin, for instance, that we're looking at. We've been talking about for several years about how you can model buildings and to make them more efficient, just how we live and breathe. And I think actually understand the legacy of we're building. I personally really like working in schools, because you build a school and it's there for 60 years. You think how many children are going through, and young adults are going through those schools, and old adults are going through those schools and learning, and how much of a difference that makes to their life. Now, we're not teachers. They're the ones that, we're providing the platform to the teachers and a really good environment for people to learn in. And I think that legacy is really, really, really important. But learning how to make that better, understanding how we can use things like digital twins, where we can model energy use in buildings and make them perform as best as possible for those end users, so those students are in the optimum environment to learn the best. The CO2 is at the right levels, the amount, not too hot, not too cold. They don't have to worry about anything like that. They can just focus on learning. But we do that in a way that's energy efficient, and we can model that building, and we can tweak it online. Soon AI will probably be able to predict that and get into how we do that. So we're at a really exciting time, but we can talk it down. So it's a really exciting, but I hope we embrace it and we use technology for the best. And I think we do as an industry. But change has always got that slight reticence. But it's getting cheaper, relatively, I think, to implement technology. And I'm really excited to see how things move on. But making sure we don't do it where it affects the personal touch for me, because construction is a relationship-based industry, particularly. I think I feel really strongly about that. I know a lot of industries are, but one of the things that I like, and we come on to what's special about construction, we talked about earlier, is people. You know, I feel quite privileged that one minute I could be talking to a labourer who might struggle to read and write, and they've been in construction for 40 years. And the next minute I'll sit down and I'll talk to a CEO of someone who might have just flown in a helicopter. You get to talk to everybody and learn from everybody, and it's really exciting.
Well, interestingly, you started off using the Elon Musk and robots, and then you've ended with the personal touch. Are we at danger of everything being built by robots and then we're losing that personal touch?
There has been there has been a lot of talk about robotics, and there's also been a lot of talk about labour levels dwindling, particularly post Brexit. We've seen that a little bit, although that's settling now. Have robots got a place? For sure. Have skilled tradesmen got a place? For sure. And I'm really encouraged over the last few years to see an increase in people really interested in engineering, in having a trade now. It's not all about being a banker, for all the potential bad things I've said about recent years about the immediacy of success and things like that. Actually, I've seen when I've been talking to schools and I've been looking at the data, we're seeing people want to do more engineering-based jobs, and whether that's an outcome from a focus on STEM subjects in young ages in schools, I don't know, but it's really encouraging, and I think there's less of a drive for everyone to go to university just for going to university's sake, but there's a real success in being a successful tradesman. They're in good salaries now, and what they produce sometimes can't be produced by robots very easily. So I think there's going to be a really big hybrid. I don't think robots are going to overtake humans. I do think they'll do some of the heavy lifting, and I say that literally, because we don't need to put our bodies on the line as much as we did 20 years ago. They will have a place, but how much that can come into mainstream construction right now, I don't know. In 20 years, I assume they'll be doing a lot of the heavy lifting. We'll probably be walking around with exoskeletons on our bodies and helping do the heavy lifting themselves, or the robots will be doing themselves, which we already are starting to see. Yeah. But I hope we can still meet like this, Jamie.
Yeah, so do I. So do I. But I see it very similar to you.
Yeah.
So the second thing I want to talk about, Will, is modern methods of construction. So, we know what modern methods of construction look like today. And interestingly, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's also, at the moment, there's a lot of sort of modular and MMC companies sort of failing, going into insolvency. So it sort of hasn't quite worked. That would suggest to me. What's your sort of view on that, and what does the future of MMC look like to you?
I think MMC is a really good idea. I think what's happened is that we've had a very traditionally based hands-on approach to construction in the UK, particularly in the UK actually, because of the heritage of the buildings, the planning system, the NIMBYism in some cases. And I think MMC was almost a response to how do we do things more efficiently? How do we, and also that coupled with how do we counter the sort of drop off in labour? Actually, we can get better productivity if we're building in factories, and then take site. We're removing a lot of the risk of being on site and building in bad weather. Potentially, we can get better quality doing that. I think, which is all is the correct thinking, really. And I think the government have jumped on the back of that and said, yeah, let's get on and let's, we need to deliver this amount of housing. We need to deliver schools. Let's do that. And it seems a really good example. And there's been lots of funding and lots of benefits around starting up MMC. And I think it's still teething. And that teething has been extended because of planning issues. We don't have the volumes, and we don't deliver the volumes that they do in Europe and America, where MMC is particularly popular. And the volumes are constrained over here by the size of the country, the pockets that we can put things in, what people want to see. They've got a real voice over here, whereas when France or America, you've got much bigger land masses, and actually there's more space between people, whereas we're more tightly packed here, which means people are a bit more vocal about what they want to see and don't want to see, and because of what the beautiful country we've got as well. So MMC is a really difficult thing. I think there's definitely a place for it. We need to keep driving different ways to build forward. I don't think MMC is quite the ticket. It's not the panacea that I think some thought it may be.
Yeah.
It's definitely got its place. Maybe we need to standardise things a bit more. Maybe we need to combine some more flexibility to MMC, but and come up with a way with as technology develops to make it a bit more flexible. Because like you say, a lot of the large businesses have failed or shut down recently, which is a shame. But I think coupled with new technologies, particularly around carbon, I'm talking to a company that makes insulation out of hemp. So you start with a carbon negative position, and you can build into products with that, and you can build that into MMC and traditional buildings. Talking about using low carbon concrete, high alkaline concrete that could be used locally, which is much less energy intensive to produce. Do it using a different reinforcing material that's extruded rock, essentially. That means you can use smaller cover on the reinforcement, reduce the cover, which means things are lighter. You use less aggregate, you use less cement, but you still get the thermal properties of the product. So there's a huge amount of things we need to look at, and there's a combination of all those things. I think MMC now is in a bit of a cycle where there was a lot of investment. It was all exciting. We haven't quite got the traction with it because of the demand isn't there. That will have to rebalance at some stage, because it's definitely a really important part of the future.
I don't know whether you're doing this on purpose, but you keep leading me perfectly into my next question. So point 3, sustainable construction.
Yeah.
So sustainable construction, are we doing enough? And if not, what more should we be doing to truly sort of embrace sustainable construction?
I don't think we're doing enough, but I don't think we can do much more at the moment. We are learning a lot quite quickly about sustainable construction, and we're at the danger of going too quickly.
Yeah. So
one of the things I'm doing at the moment is actually sitting down with some of the clients and say, actually, how much carbon does it take to build a 2, 3, 4 bed house? Because when we start to understand that, we can actually understand how to reduce it and make it more efficient. Yeah. How much carbon does it take to operate a 2, 3, 4 bed flat or house? How much carbon does it take to operate? When we start to understand that, this is sudden drive, well, we've got regulations, let's go for the next level up. Let's try and push carbon. Let's do even lower carbon. Let's do passive house. Let's do, and all these things are brilliant. BREEAM, excellent. Let's do all those things. They're really good. But let's actually understand what we're trying to do here, what we're trying to do, and what level of value and how much effort and investment do we put into that to get that level of that benchmark, whether it be sustainability, carbon, whatever it is, and then before we take it to the next level. But I think sustainability actually is defined as, I can't remember the exact definition, but it's not just about the environment. It's about having a long-term approach to things and making sure. So there is a large about the environment. It's making sure buildings will stand the test of time and are going to be functional and provide the right outcomes. So the people using those buildings, whatever they may be, whether they're offices, whether they're factories, whether they're homes, those outcomes are as sustainable, are positive for as long as possible. And sometimes I think we get too bound up in the immediacy of the low carbon or what we're doing immediately, and we've got to take a longer term approach soon. But we need to do more, and we need to do more quite quickly. And I'm really excited. I think working in the built environment, we have one of the keys to unlock low carbon living. Over the next 30 or 40, 50 years, the built environment and construction is going to be a significant part of how we end up being a much more sustainable environment. So every person I meet when I go to schools, I try and get them into the industry, because part of that, what I was talking about earlier around the people taking more of a technological view on things in terms of their careers, I think if everyone can do that, we can have a much larger impact. and actually get there a bit quicker. So I'm excited by it. I'm a bit worried about it. I've got kids. I'm thinking, what are they going to be living like in a few years? But I honestly believe they'll be living in a better society than we are now in terms of carbon. We've had huge change already. We just need to keep going and getting there. But sustainable is a really big thing. It means something different to everybody. There's so many elements to it. It's a difficult thing to narrow down and hit. But I think we're making some good headway. We just need to accelerate and do more, but at the right speed, putting our efforts in the right place.
Thank you. Yeah, good points there, Will. I want to sort of slightly move back to technology, but in respect of smart and connected infrastructure. So when I sort of think about this subject, I think I mentioned you before, it sort of brings you back to that Tom Cruise film and Minority Report. I thought we'd be living a little bit like that, where you walk into the shopping centre, hello Mr. Barrett, and all the sort of smart connectivity on your sort of tube lines or what have you. We're not quite there, but how can we make benefit of sort of smart and interconnectivity in the infrastructure that we build? And
again, that's just accelerating at the moment. I think, I've got an electric car. We're getting to the point where, I've had one for about 4 years now, and I used to go up and I used to try every card trying to make it work, and the charger wouldn't work. Now we're getting to the point now, and that was hugely frustrating because it always happened when you were late for something or you really needed that charger to work. We're getting to the point now where you can drive up to a car charger and it knows your car. You plug it in, it already knows your car. It knows where to bill. It knows how to do it. And that'll only accelerate, I think. So, life is getting easier. At the same time, I think we might be overcomplicating it sometimes. We overthink things. I think we overthink more than we did 30 years, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. But I think that interconnectivity is improving. I know we're using a lot of technology to make sure our different teams, and that be a client team, architectural team, structural team, to work together. So we've got a particular platform that will help people share information. So we've got One Truth. It's really easy. We're getting AI and machine learning to do things like pick, instead of having someone having to type in a drawing register sheet for every time a drawing is issued or distributed. That's all done automatically now. There's a huge amount of benefits, and all those things add up quite quickly. So it is making us more productive, but we've just got to realise that it's helping us get more productive and make sure we focus on the things that matter, and we get the digital infrastructure, the digital equipment to do the things that make our lives easier, really. And so it allows us the time to be more focused rather than getting distracted doing other things.
I'd like to end...
Does that answer your question on infrastructure?
It does, yeah, it absolutely does.
Because I don't know about cars will be interesting. Are we going to be driving around in driverless cars quite soon? And that would hugely impact productivity, because we can be working and moving at the same time. And so there's lots to talk about that. But hopefully that answers your question.
It did answer my question, and I'd like to sort of end on people, which has been a sort of a common theme. So the sort of fifth point really is around like the skilled workforce and digital transformation. It's like, how do we develop talent? How do we harness the development of the next generation? And how do we use digital transformation to encourage and develop learning, i.e. through sort of augmented or virtual reality?
Yeah, there's a lot to cover there, Jamie.
Give it a go, Will.
So I think talent is really important. We'll start with talent. It's the most important thing, I think. And it's about a people thing. We are very careful who we select, and I think it comes down to that raw desire to develop and find someone who's aligned with what you want to achieve as a business and who will fit into the business, and then giving them the tools to and trusting them to develop and supporting them to develop. And I think sometimes you can be too prescribed around that. You need to get the right person. There's someone who appreciates that and will grab that and take it forwards. Sometimes you can inspire people, but people have got to want to be there. So it comes down to getting the right people into the industry and providing the right platform and an inspiring and friendly and open place to work where they're encouraged to ask open questions. To ask open questions, I think, is really important. That's the and also for people to understand that they can make a real impact in society. And I think, 20 years ago, I don't think, probably even less, 10 years ago, the impact that a bricklayer maybe coming into the industry had was probably less. And I think now those types of roles are being valued more and more. And I think that value and people realising that actually being a carpenter, a joiner, plumber is actually a really well-paid, good job. I think that's fundamental to making sure we have some really good people in the future. I also have got a bit of a, we are very health and safety focused now for good reason, but we have got to trust people and give people experience to make the right decisions. This isn't just a work thing. This is a child thing. If you go back to when we were growing up, I don't know about you, but the sort of age-old thing was you come home when the street lights go on. That's not how our kids live now, and it's the same with the teams that we're fostering and developing. We've got to give them enough headroom in a safe environment to go and make their own mistakes, and help them understand how to improve. I think there's definitely a school of thought to say that they're not getting as much experience just out in the field as they could do, and that's going to have a knock-on effect further down the line. There's a very good answer, question to say actually augmented reality and experience on digital twins and all the technology we were talking about earlier might actually give them more experience quicker, and hopefully that is the case, because you can model all those things almost like having a simulator in an aeroplane. I don't know how that would work. It's a good point. Maybe we should discuss that later. But there's some really good technology. Those are the things that concern me a little bit. But the same token, I think the more we can communicate, the more we can share ideas, the better we'll be. And technology is helping us is enabling us to do that. We just got to use it in the right way. And AI, I can see it being used for a lot of really good things, and I stay positive about it. It could be used for a lot of bad things. I'm staying positive. I hope it's being used for a lot of good things.
Will, thank you. You've provided some really, really good sort of thoughts and perspectives on all the sort of subjects we've talked about today. I have no doubt there's some great value in the video for anyone who watches this video, and some really good stuff on the future of construction. So thank you very much for today. Is there any sort of topic or anything I haven't sort of covered that you sort of, having gone through all this sort of conversation and think about lots of things in construction, is there anything that you sort of we haven't covered or we could cover?
I've got way more to cover, Jamie. I just can't get it out. Okay. Every question you've got, I've had about 5 points. I've probably only covered about 2 of them in each question. But it's been really fascinating conversation. It's quite interesting to talk about it in this environment. So
it sounds like we've got a part 2 coming up.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks a lot, Will. Thank you. So I hope you found value in today's video. If you have any questions or you'd like to know anything more about the subjects we covered, please do get in contact, and we really look forward to hearing from you.